But yeah, resume review for Danielle. So this was like one of the previous ones we've done where the original file was a docx converted to a PDF, and so therefore it creates this double bulleted approach. So I know this is marking your original resume. So just highlighting that for you. First thing off the bat is your sections need to be clearer. So what I would do is I would bold your sections and have like a horizontal underline just so it's easier and helps split the page up a little bit more. I would also consider using more of the margin as well. It seems the resume is quite locked into this narrow pane, this narrow viewing pane, which isn't really helpful. Professional summary is too long. This should be cut by at least half. It's great that you speak about the role that you're currently in and all the role that you're looking for and how many years experience you've got and some of the areas where you're skilled in. However, I think you should also try to see if you can back this up where possible with some key highlights of your career that explain why you would be best suited for whichever role it is that you're applying to, or the core roles that you would be wanting to apply to. So, for example, saying things like known for professionalism, empathy, and clear communication in both voice and written channels, I would say is a generic statement, and so it should be removed. I think being remote ready is a positive, though I think nowadays most companies would expect you to be able to have done some form of remote type experience before. And so they won't necessarily want to have this information. They won't necessarily look too positively at you having this information in your resume whatsoever. So I would get rid of that entirely. When you mentioned that you're skilled in managing billing inquiries, it would be great to quantify this. So how many billing inquiries have you done? And what are some unique metrics and or statements that would help to, I guess, add more clarity to what you can provide for an organization. So that's definitely something worth looking at. When we see core competencies, I assume this is more or less supposed to be like your skills section. So this speaks to the different tools that you either use and or the different skills that you have. Plus you have languages. I think the issue here is that we're mixing 3 or 4 different things together. So we have tools that you're using, then we have soft skills listed in there as well, and then we also have languages. I think that these should all be separate. They should all be separate sections. Though I don't think you don't need to add generic soft skills. Focus more so on just on the hard skills as well, if possible. Also, I'm starting to notice a lot of people mentioning Microsoft Office Suite, and it's like every single resume I've looked at mentions this to some form degree. If everyone's mentioning it, it means that it's not worth anything, and it doesn't help to differentiate you. And if it doesn't help to differentiate you, then I would suggest that you remove it entirely. Any employee would assume that you know how to use a presentation software, a Word document editor, and a spreadsheet. So that's not necessary. The things that's really interesting here is this also speaks to your qualifications. So, or at the very least, you be able to implement this inside of an organization. So I wonder if that's also relevant because we put in 3 or 4 different types of experience here, when they should be their own separate section. Remote customer support and client communication, it doesn't really tell me anything as a hiring manager, and it isn't really that helpful either. It doesn't seem like it's terminology that is used in remote CS teams from the little experience that I do have. So, for example, I would be expecting to see stuff like SLAs and NPS and things like that in here rather than the generic stuff. So yeah, that's my feedback on that front. Professional experience section. Okay, so you have name of role, company. Okay, so you mentioned, okay, so what I'm seeing here is you've got the title down here, the date here, then the company, but you've prefaced it by saying it's a contractor position. I think you should just get rid of this, and you should just have the role you did first. The role you did first is what matters. So it should say customer support specialist, and then next to it can have the company name, so Mod Squad in that case, and then you would have the dates next, and these should be aligned to the right, so it's easier to see. And I would also say the same for the other roles as well. So, I mean, it's also fine for you to do it this way because it seems like, yeah, you're using 2 different formats for your experience section. You're using in your experience section, you're naming the role that you did and the name of the company on 2 separate lines with the date, and then in follow-up roles, it's all in one line. So the ones where it's all in one line, they look pretty good. So I would suggest to stick to that format if you prefer. Though in my honest opinion, still having the dates aligned to the right so that it's consistent. So March 2021 to 2024 can be aligned to the right, and so everything is easy to see and scan. Metrics and bullets. So I like the fact that you do have roughly 2 or 3 bullets per role. If some of them you do have 4 bullets, I would suggest probably removing it and reducing it to about 3 bullets or 2 bullets where relevant, and include only your most impactful stuff. Also make sure that you just focus on metrics more so. So for example, manage high volume of inbound calls. Well, you say high volume, or what does high volume look like? How many inbound calls were you doing per day, per week, per month, per year? And what was the speed at which you was getting back to people? How long did it take before those tickets were closed? Those sorts of things. That's kind of what I'd be looking at. Whereas things like this is irrelevant. Stay current on company product services. Well, you should. That's basic. Trained in product sales and cross-selling strategies to boost customer retention. Instead of saying that you've been trained in it, it sounds like that's something that someone else gave to you. It doesn't show the impact that you gave to an organization. You should rewrite this to focus more so on how you was able to boost customer retention. So you could say something like boosted customer retention by 30% by doing blah, blah, blah. So by implementing different cross-selling and strategies or whatever that specific thing is. That adds a lot more credence to what you're trying to speak to. Aids credibility, and actually shows the impact that you delivered for the organization, rather than something that someone taught you per se. And I guess it's the same for the others. So making sure that you're mentioning bullets, you're mentioning the specific metrics. Sorry. And for example here, consistently maintained high customer satisfaction. Well, what does high look like? High customer satisfaction could look very different to different companies and to different individuals. If you're applying for a job at a company that already has a client satisfaction rate of 95%, they may look at your resume and think, okay, so you'll just keep us at that 95% rating, or maybe slightly lower. There's no guarantee here that you're going to help us go from 95% to 98%, unless you have the proof to show that you've done that. And so therefore, that needs to be included in your resume. Okay, education section. So similar advice as well. Okay, this is fine. Just follow the same feedback that I gave in terms of layout. And then with tools, right, so you now have, you call it remote ready tools and technical proficiency. Okay, I don't have any issue with this per se. The only issue that I'd probably think to is that you've got a list of tools here, and then you've also got a list of stuff here where you say things like CRM data entry systems and Microsoft Office suite. So it feels like there's this section and the skills section, and the tool section could be split into different sections beneath each other that shows skills, qualifications, and that sort of thing, and languages, etc. I think that the being bilingual is actually a bigger benefit and is more impressive than what you might think, especially if you're applying for remote roles where you're working in CS, in CS, and so therefore you're covering a specific time zone. So let's say if you're covering Europe, there is a good chance that you'll be speaking to customers who, yes, speak English, but then also might be French based. And so it means that you could potentially take a business's entire French client base because you're the only person in the company or the only person in your team that would speak French with some level of proficiency. I think that should be highlighted, or at the very least moved forward. So I would even consider your professional summary changing it something like French speaking customer service rep with over 4 years experience. It adds more credibility to you, and it helps to differentiate you against somebody else who could have the exact same skills and experience as you, but they only speak one language. So I would recommend those changes. I can see if there's anything else that comes to mind for me as I just read through this a little bit more. Yeah, I would say also having your target role somewhere in your header section I think is really important. So you could put you've got your name, and then you should have like a dash or whatnot, and then put the role that you're actually applying to, or the types of roles that you're looking to get to. And for different organizations, it might look different, but try to find one that makes sense. So at first glance, I would say you should be looking at being a customer success manager, especially if you're applying for remote roles. And so therefore, that's probably something that I would include in the header section of your resume. But yeah, I think other than that, the rest should be fine. It's good that you got it down to 2 pages. But yeah, make those changes, and I'm more than certain that you will start to get some inquiries. But that being said, customer service roles are one of the most competitive roles, even on the wearedistributed job board. And if you check the number of people who are applying to these types of positions, it's higher than almost any other job family in our database that we track. And so therefore, I wonder if there are ways where you can differentiate yourself with or against other candidates. And the language component is definitely going to help you, and you should try to see if there's anything else that you can do. And because of what you've done beforehand, there would have been teams that you've worked with, and so you would be able to tell based on your skill set and their skill set where you think you edge them and where they probably edge you. And so try to see if you can bring some of that to the table in your resume so that it doesn't look generic and it doesn't speak to the same experience that everybody else has as well. For example, if you had worked for a specific competitor, well, that gives you a massive advantage over everybody else. So that's your differentiating angle. So try to make sure that your resume has at least 2 to 3 differentiators. That helps you out. All right. I'll leave it there for now, but I hope this helps. Take care. Bye.